Welcome back to Train Signal. You are watching the video for Lab 3 using Group Policy Object to deploy applications. In this video, we have one major task at hand, and that is to deploy Microsoft Office 2000 Professional software on computers in our network. One of the biggest advantages of Active Directory, and perhaps one of the biggest selling points of Windows 2000 Server and Professional when they came out, was the fact that you now could deploy or install applications across the network automatically when users logged in. Let's see how application deployment has been tackled by different software settings in the past and how it can be done now. Traditionally, the way to install software is to simply take a CD, insert the CD and install a software. Now this is good on one or two computers in a small network. However, if you have hundreds of computers and several different applications to install, this is not a practical feature or a practical way of doing this. So to improve upon that, one of the ways of deploying applications was simply to go to a server, and I'm going to show you that method as well. And then on the server, what you do is you create a folder, share it. In this case, I've created a folder called Office 2000. I've shared it, and then copied the entire contents of the CD of Office 2000 Professional into that folder. Once that is done, then what you can do is administrators can go to each client computer, connect to the share on the central server, and then simply run the setup program to install the application on that particular computer. So the advantage over here is that I don't need a CD, and simultaneously I can install applications on several computers on the network. This method is not bad. The only problem is that it takes up a lot of bandwidth, and I still have to go from computer to computer in order to install the application. So a slight improvement over the CD method, but not great. Then the other method that is used widely in companies is to use what is known as imaging. There are two ways of doing this. One is to use a third-party software known as Ghost, which will be covered in the next series of videos, Lab 15. And the other method that is new in Windows 2000 is called Remote Installation Services, which will also be covered in Lab 15. So that's the third method, where you actually take a computer, you deploy the application, you take the picture of that computer, and then simply throw that picture on all the computers that you would like to get that particular application. And last but not the least is the method that we're going to talk about, which is group policy. And this is great. Here's how group policy will work. What you will do is create a group policy. In our case, we'll create a group policy for Office 2000, and then apply that group policy or link it to a certain OU. That group policy will simply say that when the user in this particular container logs in, check whether this person has this application. If not, let's give this application to this user. As good as that. So all you have to do is create a policy, and then there are several steps in doing so. Link the policy to the right OU, and once the users log on, they should be able to actually get the policy and be able to deploy it. In order to do this, Microsoft had to come out with a new technology called the IntelliMirror, and this is how this technology works. So what we're going to do is the following. What we're going to do is first check out what we have done so far in our network, because those will be the building blocks of creating this group policy object to deploy Office 2000. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Active Directory users and computers, and then just make sure that all the user accounts have been created according to the table that I showed you before, and hopefully you've done the same yourself. So here we go. In the California OU, there are 3 OUs, and each of the OUs has a user that is of interest to us. In North Carolina OU, again, there are 3 OUs, and each of the OUs has the users that I had put in the table. What we're going to do is mostly do the labs with this user called Jill Smith, whose logon name is J Smith in the California OU. So to begin with, let's make sure that J Smith can log on from her computer in the network. So let's say J Smith uses the computer called Client 1. So what I'm going to do is connect to Client 1, and then try to log in as J Smith to this computer. By default, I'd saved the username and password, so I'm automatically in as the administrator. I will change that in just a moment. But this way we know that our connection to Client 1 is good. And now, as soon as this connection is made, I log off and then modify, and this way you'll be able to see how you can do that as well. So let's modify this. And from now on, we're going to say that please do not log me in automatically, ask me for the username and password. So in order to do that, what I'll do is, here we go, we lost a connection. I'll make modifications to this connection object, and oops, sorry, I need to edit it. And in here, I will take away the username and the password, and I'm going to say don't save anything. So what we'll do now is just make the connection for me. Let's resave this as Client 1. it will just make the connection for me and then ask me to enter the username and the password. So here we go. The connection is made. Now I would like to enter the username jsmith, and a password is password1, and we need to also make sure that we are logging on not to this client computer but to the benandbrady.com network. So I'm going to click on the OK button, and there we go. That's a policy that I was trying to warn you of. The local policy of the system does not permit you to log on interactively. What you need to do is give sufficient permission to JSmith in order for her to be able to log on to the network. So let's do that. Just for the purposes of this lab, what I'm going to do is cancel off. And again, this is happening simply because I'm actually connecting it via remote desktop protocol. So what I'm going to do is just give JSmith enough rights. So what we will do is we'll go to our properties and make her a member of. Again, you do not have to do this because you'll be performing this activity on different computers just like I'm doing, except that I'm capturing all this on my screen, whereas you do not have to do that. So click on the OK button, and this policy may take a few minutes to be in effect. So what I'm going to do is the following. Let's try. Let's try if it has already been in effect. If not, we will just give it some time. But by the time the policy is in effect. So let's try one more time. Nope, not yet. Okay, so let's give it some time and then we'll try out this client in a few minutes. Now, what I'm going to do is the following. Show you the steps as to how this application deployment is done. But before we do that, you need to understand that there are two different methods of actually installing these applications. One is called the assign method and the other is called a publish method. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Let's talk about the main method, which is the assign method. Now, in order to use the assign method, let's go back to our folder in which I had created and shared Office 2000. In order to use the assign method, what the vendor of the application has to do is give you a file that has what is known as the MSI extension. Now, here's the file for that, data1. You do not see the extension, so let's turn that on. I'm going to go to Tools, Folder Options, View, and then I'm going to say over here, do not hide file and folder extensions, and I would like to also be able to see all the system files and show me the full path. So this is a common way of working where you check on these three boxes where you can see the paths in the title bar and so forth, and then you want to show hidden files and folders, and you uncheck these two boxes where you say hide file extensions. In other words, I would like to see the extensions so I can see .msi over here, and then hide protected operating system files such as boot INI. In the kind of work that we do, we need to see these extensions. So here we go. These are the different files in the Office 2000 container, and one of the files that is of interest to me is called the data1.msi. So this is what uses the IntelliMirror technology to actually install applications. If you have this file, data1.msi, then you can use what is known as the assign method. And what the assign method does is the following. When the user logs on, they'll click on Start Programs button, and then they will see all the applications that they would like to deploy sitting right here. For example, if they would like to use Office, they will see Microsoft Office as a link over here, and then you will go to simply Word, and then when they click on Word, the application will automatically get installed on their particular desktop. So that's the assign method. In the assign method, once again, the shortcut to the application is advertised in the desktop and on the start menu. So in other words, when you assign an application, when the user logs in for the very first time to that particular computer, when they click on Start Programs, they will see the links to Word, Excel, and so forth. The application is still not installed. The very first time they use the application, it will get installed. The application can also get installed in a different way. Let's say that you were to give an Excel spreadsheet on a floppy disk to this particular user. When this user uses My Computer and then accesses the floppy disk and looks at the name of the file, for example, the name of the file is charts.xls. When they double click on that file extension, what the local computer will do is check whether Excel has been installed. If Excel has not been installed, it will check with the group policy and see if this user actually would is assigned the application Microsoft Excel. And if so, Excel will be installed on that user's computer, and then the file will open up automatically after that. So this method is known as file invocation, where you double click on a certain file extension, and because that application is supposed to be assigned to that particular user, the application will get assigned to that person. The second method is what is known as the publish method. Well, this method has one advantage and one major disadvantage. Unlike in the assign method, when you publish an application, the application actually will not appear under the program's menu. It is not advertised on the desktop. What you actually have to do to install the application, or rather what the user has to do to install the application, is actually go to the control panel. And in control panel, they have to go to add remove programs, and in there they have to click on the link that says add new programs, and then all the programs that are available on the network will actually show up over here, and they'll be able to install it from there. So obviously this is not a better method, simply because you would rather make it as easy as possible for users by putting a shortcut on the desktop right over here, so that they simply click on the application like they're normally used to using it, and then if the application is not there, it gets installed. However, this method of publish has one great advantage. If you recall, going back to DC1 over here, and I'm going to open up this Office 2000 folder one more time, that the vendor of the application must give you an MSI file. Well, publish, you do not require an MSI file. So there is a big disadvantage, because now you have to go to the control panel. But the big advantage over here is that if I do not have an MSI file, in other words, if I have an older application that I would like to deploy, or the vendor of my application only gives me the regular setup.exe file, I can still actually create what is known as a zap file and then publish this application to users, so that they can simply go to control panel and then install the application from there. And this is what I'm going to discuss in the next video. In this particular video, we will do the assign method, and we will do it for applications that have an MSI kind of a file with it. And you need to know what MSI file is being used. Different applications use different MSI files. You may have to check the documentation for that. But just to get you started over here, Office 2000's setup file for application deployment is data1.msi. So if you are actually using the CD to install this application, you simply double click on setup.exe. However, if you're deploying it, you will select data1.msi and then go ahead and deploy the application. Now, let's go through the process of actually making this work. So before we do that, let's try one more time to log into JSmith. What I'd done was restarted the computer, simply because we had made a change to the computer settings, and I wasn't sure whether it was in effect or not. So restarting the computer, the client computer, definitely helps. So I am going to log in as JSmith and use the password over here, and we are logging onto the network benandbrady.com. There we go. This time I was successful. Now what I want to show you is that two things. Number one, we successfully logged on to the domain benandbrady.com for the very first time as a user JSmith, and this will be a typical user in our domain. And the other thing I want to show you is that on this computer I've simply installed Windows XP as a client computer. I do not have the applications installed. So like I promised you in the beginning of this video, that we will have live demonstrations of all the labs that I do. That is why if the error messages show up on my screen, you have a good idea that such error messages can show up on your screens as well, and you know exactly how to troubleshoot it. So there is no applications over here, and what we're going to do is now deploy Office 2000 Professional and then see if JSmith, the user JSmith, actually gets it. So how do you actually go ahead deploying applications? Here are the steps. The first step is to what is known as create a software deployment point. A software deployment point is a fancy word to suggest the following. What a software deployment point does is the following. It creates when you say create a software deployment point, what you mean is create a folder. In our case, we created a folder called Office 2000, share it, and then copy the contents of the CD-ROM into this folder. So here's what we have done so far. I have already created a folder called Office 2000. I've copied the contents of the CD to this folder, and I've shared this folder as Office 2000. So that was the first steps, creating the software deployment point, and we have done so. Once again, to summarize, software deployment point simply means create a folder, share it, copy the contents of the CD-ROM to this particular folder. The second step is to create the OU structure and the users, and we've done so in the previous video. So here's our OU structure. To summarize, California, North Carolina, and in there are several OUs, and then we have different users sitting in different OUs. The reason we did this was so that once we deploy the application, once we assign the group policy to certain OU, only the users in that OU will get that particular application. So that is why it is important that we create our organizational unit structure and put the right users in the right OUs so that our policies are meaningful. Then the third thing we need to do is create what is known as the group policy object and then deploy Microsoft Office 2000. So let's go ahead and do that. And in doing so, I'm going to explain to you all the steps that are necessary in order to make this happen. So I'm back on DC1. I'm going to close this screen over here. And now let me show you how to create our first group policy object. So what I'm going to do is start Active Directory users and computers. And now just to lay out a scenario over here, what we will do is the following. Our user, Jill Smith, that we're going to test against is in the accounting OU. So what I'm going to do is create create a group policy object on California and link it to it. So to do that, in other words, I would like to create a new group policy object and link it to California. You need to right click on California, click on properties, and then go to the tab called group policy. And over here, there is no policy because there were only, if you recall, two default policies: the default domain policy linked to the domain object, and the default domain controllers policy linked to the domain controllers OU over here. So we're going to create a new group policy. I'm going to click on a new button, and then let's call it Office 2000, Office 2000 policy. Okay, so that's a new policy. So we have done the following so far. We have created a new policy, and we have also linked it to the California OU because we actually created this policy by right-clicking on the California OU. And this point will be made clearer in Server 2003 in the Group Policy Management tool, because over there you create a policy and then you physically create the link so that you can see the two in action. In fact, you also see a little icon that shows you that this is not a policy but just a link. So once we have done that, now we are ready to actually make this policy do certain things. In other words, what I would like to do is edit this policy. So I'm going to click on the edit button. And now there are two options: computer configuration, user configuration. What I would like to do is the following. When the user, J. Smith, logs in, I would like to assign her Microsoft Office 2000 application. So in other words, what I would like her to do is the following. She can visit any computer in benandbrady.com domain and log in. If that particular computer does not have Office 2000, Office 2000 will be installed on that particular computer. So what I would like to do is use what is known as the user configuration, because I would like to control who gets or does not get this policy based on who the user is. So we're going to use user configuration. Now in user configuration, if you remember, there were two different options of deploying applications. Assign method, where it will show up on the start menu under the programs menu over here, or the second method was publish, where you have to go to the control panel and then install the applications from there. Assign can be used if you have if you have an MSI file, and in our case we do have an MSI file. So we're going to use the assign method. In other words, I'm going to assign the application Office 2000 to users. So in order to do that, you need to expand on software settings. So under user configuration, expand software settings, select software installation, right click, new, and then over here you have to select package. Now you need to select the MSI file that will actually make this happen. Now let me show you the incorrect way first. So what I'm going to do is go to the C drive, because I have my folder in the C drive, and then here's my MSI file that will actually install the package. Now I'm going to click on the open button. It should give me an error message like this. This error message is important. What this is saying is the following, that even if you were to go ahead and deploy this application, the user will not actually get this package simply for the following reasons. Now let me do it one more time to show you why. Package. Now if I were to go through this method, go to the C drive, and then in the C drive go to the folder called Office 2000 and then pick up data1.msi, what will happen is the following. When the user, J. Smith, logs in from the computer, client 1, when she logs in, she will get the effects of this policy, and the policy simply says go to the C drive, look for the folder Office 2000, and in there run the MSI file to start the installation of this particular package. Well, in her computer, client 1, there is no folder Office 2000 that does not have this contents. So in other words, my application deployment will fail because it is looking for this package in the wrong direction. That is why in the software deployment point in the SDP, we actually created the folder and shared it, because the correct way of accessing this is through network places. So once again, always go through it through network places. In other words, you would like to give the path of a share over here. So I'm going to expand Microsoft Network, go to Ben and Brady, and go to DC1, and here's a share Office 2000, and now pick up data1.msi file, click on the open button, and here are my different methods: publish, assign, or advanced publish and assign. Publish will publish it in the control panel, assign will show it on the desktop, and the advanced publish and assign you can actually select that and do other configuration settings, and we will do that in a different video. So at this point, I'm interested in assigning this application, and then click on the OK button over here. Take a couple of minutes, and then you will see a link that shows up over here that says that Office 2000 has been successfully assigned to this particular OU. So here we go. Microsoft Office 2000 Professional has been assigned for auto install, and what I'm going to do is close this screen, and then what we have done is the following. We have created a new GPU Office 2000 policy, we have linked it to the California OU, and we have told this GPU to go ahead and install the application Office 2000 to users in the California OU. So I'm going to click on the OK button over here, and then let's minimize this one more time and go back to our nodes over here. So far what we have done is the following: created an SDP, we have created the OU structure and the users, and then we have created the group policy to deploy that application to users in that OU. Now the last thing is to actually test this out. So before we do that, what I would like you to do is the following. This policy can take up to 15 minutes to be in effect. So what you need to do is the following, just in order to be able to push it quickly, so I can show you for the purposes of this video. Ordinarily you do not have to do this. So what you need to do is, on the domain controller DC1, go to the command prompt, and then over there type the following command: secedit space, and here's a switch with a slash, refresh policy space user and underscore policy. What this command does is the following. The secedit command is used for to change the security settings and to actually push the GPU so that they are in effect immediately. So what I'm doing is using the secedit command with a switch that says refresh policy. As the word suggests, it's going to push the policy immediately. And if you recall, in the group policy there are two components: computer configuration and user configuration. Because I created this policy under the user node, I'm going to say user underscore policy. Had I done the same thing under the computer configuration node, I would have said computer underscore policy. So I'm going to hit enter, and again this is optional. Even now it says that give me a few minutes and I'll make sure that the application gets actually pushed to the domain. So I'm going to exit out of over here, minimize this, and now we are ready to test our client. So what I'm going to do is make a connection to client 1 and then log in as JSmith and see if we can actually get the application Office 2000 installed on this particular computer. So let's make our connection, and I'm trying to log into client 1, and we're going to log in as JSmith. Okay, now observe the screen as I click on the log on button, loading your personal settings. Should take a couple of minutes before it creates a desktop for us. And there we go. Look at this. It's all the icons for the applications that showed up over here. Remember, we are using the assign method, so the applications are advertised in the start under the programs menu. Now they're not installed yet, so what I have to still do is click on Microsoft Word. So if I'm Jill Smith and I'm logging on to this computer for the very first time, and I'm going to click on Microsoft Word over here, and automatically it will start the installation process for me. Isn't that great? So from now on, you do not have to go around from computer to computer with the CD-ROM or to connect to a network share in order to install your applications. Simply deploy them using a group policy object to the domain, and every time the user logs on, they will automatically get the applications that they need. And now we just use the example of one application, Microsoft Office 2000 Professional. You can deploy as many applications as you want. Remember, if you have the MSI file, you can use the assign method, which makes it easy for users to find the application. If you do not have the MSI file, that's not a problem either. In the next video, I will show you how to actually use these legacy applications and then deploy them to your network. So either ways, your applications will be delivered to the user's desktop automatically using group policy objects. So there we go. Feature Office Assistant is not installed. Actually, I should thank it for that. And then I can start using Microsoft Word. I'm going to close this and quickly do one more application, Excel, just to show you that the second time you use the application, it doesn't take as long as you saw Microsoft Word take to install. So again, it's going to install that particular application, but this time the process goes a little bit faster than it did the first time because all the common files have been installed. So don't worry about every time when the user clicks on, well, it's going to start the installation process. That's not true. The first time it takes the longest, and then as time proceeds, it will take a short period of time to actually get the application going. In fact, if I were to click on Word now, it should start up like it has already been installed before. There we go. Okay, so the performance is great on this particular client computer, and as expected. Just keep a few things in mind when you're doing this deployment. The first thing is you need to decide whether you want to use the assign method or the publish method. Try to use the assign method as much as possible because it's the easiest for the users to find the application that they need. Second decision you have to make is whether you want to assign it to either the computer configuration or to the user configuration. If you assign it to the computer configuration, it means the following. Regardless of who the user is, every time the computer starts, the application will be installed automatically on that particular computer. So this can be a good method for a common application such as Office 2000. If you feel that Office 2000 should be installed on each and every computer or in a certain OU, at least if not in the whole domain, so in that case what you do is you simply assign the Office 2000 GPO to the computer configuration, and then every time the computer starts, the application will be installed regardless of who the user is. So any user who logs onto that computer will get that particular application. Administrators, on the other hand, would like to control more the user environment. So it's a good idea to actually assign these applications to users so you control exactly which user gets what application. For example, a specific application like an accounting package should only be given to accountants, not installed on all the computers in a network for licensing issues and for other issues as well. They're never going to use it. So why bother to install it on those computers? So that's a decision you have to make. So once that is done, you simply create a software deployment point, and I showed you how to do that. You create the organizational unit and structure and the users, and then what you do is you go ahead and you actually deploy the application for that particular OU, and then once the users log on, they'll be able to actually get into their desktops and install the application right then and there. Now what I'm going to do is the following, just to show you that because we had linked, let's do this one more time. I'm going to go back to our remote desktop connection over here and go to Active Directory users and computers, just to make a point over here that this particular GPU that we assigned was linked to the California OU. So if I were to go to the North Carolina OU, for example, right click, go to properties, and then go to the group policy tab over here, I should not expect to find that group policy object over here because it is not linked. So if I were to log in as a user under the North Carolina OU, and we'll take the example of this user, we'll log in as Peter Ramirez, for example. Okay, so when I log in as Peter Ramirez as a logon name, I should not get the application Office 2000. So let's try that out. I'm going to minimize this, and then what we'll do is we'll log on to a client one more time. Let's log off as Jill Smith first. So I'm going to log off. Soon as the log off is finished, I'll lose the connection to client 1. There we go. And this time I'm going to log on to client 1 as Peter Ramirez, because Peter Ramirez is in the North Carolina OU, and see if I'm able to get the application Office 2000 or not. So let's make a connection one more time, and this time I'll log in as P Ramirez. Okay, let's see what happens. There we go, I'm in. It's applying my personal settings because I'm logging in for the very first time as P Ramirez. Take just a little bit longer for the client desktop to build up. And then once this builds up, what we will do is click on the start button and then check out the applications in the menu. So it's up and running. Alrighty, so let's go to programs, and there we go. Office is not there, even though on the same computer, client 1, you were able to access the application Office when you logged on as J. Smith. So that gives you a good idea as to how users can be controlled. You can control exactly which user gets what application, regardless of what computer they log on from. And that's the power of assigning applications to users rather than to computers. So we did that, and then we checked out how Microsoft Office 2000 can be installed by clicking on the links out there. So that should conclude our video. This is the first group policy object that you created. In this video, I showed you how to create the group policy object, how to link it, and then we learned the difference between the assign and the publish methods, and then we used the 4-step process over here to actually install the application. Now, things sometimes don't work out the way they should, and if that's the case, here's what you should do. Here's a checklist. One of the first things that you should check for is make sure that the DNS is listed correctly in the TCP/IP properties of the client. This is a common mistake. On the client side, you will notice that if you go to the TCP/IP properties, if the DNS is not listed over there as a proper DNS for the domain, this process will not work. DNS is significantly important for Active Directory. Without DNS, Active Directory does not function properly. If you actually have a properly working DHCP server on your network that is assigning the IP address of DNS, then you should not have an issue at all. Then the second thing you need to make sure is that the user actually belongs to the OU or to the child OU that is linked to that GPO. In other words, remember over here, when we logged in as P. Ramirez, we did not get the application. So if P. Ramirez calls in and says that, hey, I cannot use Office 2000, do not start troubleshooting and trying to give this person the application. Check out the policy. Maybe he's not supposed to get that application. Or if he is, then he does not belong to the right OU, or that particular OU needs that policy to be linked. Remember, you do not have to recreate the policy. All you have to do is link the existing policy to that OU. So just because a user does not get the application does not mean that the group policy is not working. You have to look at the membership of that user as to which user that, as to which OU that user belongs to. And last but not the least, do this on a regular basis. Refresh your policies by typing secedit/refresh policy, user underscore policy, or machine underscore policy, depending on where you have actually set up the GPO. In Server 2003, they have taken this long command because this was perhaps one of the most oftenly typed commands in Windows 2000, and they made it very short, GP update, meaning group policy update. However, in Server 2000, you still have to continue to type this policy. So this should conclude our video in application deployment. I thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you very soon in a different video in Active Directory.